Right, so this right here is the software. So this is the main screen you can see right now. This is what you will see if you boot up the system. Usually the software is in the Windows startup, so as soon as you boot up the system after like a minute or so, this is usually the screen you'll find yourself in. First thing you can see is username and password here. By default, you don't need that. So in the default software, you can just hit the login button and you're in. That's it. If you want, we can set up usernames and passwords here, so you have the system just a bit more secure, a bit more locked down, so not just anybody can, well, look at images or take x-rays here. By default, though, as I said, you can just hit the login button, and this will get me to the patient screen up here. So these are the different menus of the software. Patient, this is where I plan my future patients. X-ray, this is where I actually take the x-rays and plan the study. Lists is where I see my past patients, and management, this goes you back into the main screen. So this is where we just were. I can log out here, change patients if I want to. I can exit the software, or I can log back in here. Right, so again, patient screen, I have 3 different options here to input patient data. Right now you can see there's nothing in here, and I have to press one of those buttons. New would be the manual input. So this is if you have like a mobile system, obviously you're probably going to want to have mobile input, manual input. If you have a network connection, if you have a RIS system or a PAX server, then you might get your information automatically from there. And if you don't have the information, the animal information, or if you just want to do the X-ray quickly, then you can also use the emergency button. So let's try manual input for starters. If I click on new here, you can see on the left here, these fields become active. By default, some of the fields are red, so owner name, patient name, and the ID. The ID is randomly generated in this case, but it can also be manually inserted. So this can be set up as you like. The owner name, yeah, let's just try something here. Oh, we already got someone. Yeah, so I can already show you this off here. So there are some proposal data here. So if I've x-rayed the same patient in the past, then on the right, you will see proposal data from the database. If I have not x-rayed the patient before, then I can just insert manually here. So this works for individual fields, such as the owner. So if I had the same owner in the past, but this time he's with a different animal, I can just click on here. But if it's the same entire animal, I can click on the right. So let's say this is just a new owner and a new animal. So I don't know, what's the horse name? Something like that. It sounds horsey to me. The rest of the fields, you can see they're gray, and you can insert them or not. So I can say, okay, the horse is 2 years old or something, or if I have the full birth date, I can enter that here as well. So something like this, perhaps. And then it's going to calculate the age for me. The rest, again, this is all voluntary. I can enter this or I can just not enter it. Doesn't really matter much. If I'm happy with the information I entered, I can hit insert patient here. And so this is going to add it to this list here. And I can still make changes if I want to. Right, the next button would be the RIS button. So this is if I have a local network where I have some RIS running, some server that provides patient information directly to the system. So this works with certain RIS systems, but not all of them. So if I click on this button, since the demo system, I'm gonna get a demo patient here, demo animal. But in your case, this would refresh automatically. So you can see sometimes it goes gray and then there's a little bar on the bottom that's running out, and that's just the countdown until it refreshes automatically again. Right, so if I click this a few times, I'm gonna have a few patients here. These would come in automatically if I have a network set up for that. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to insert them manually. And finally, as I said, there's the emergency button. This just gets me automatically to the next screen without having to enter anything at all. Otherwise, if I want to get to the next screen, to the X-ray screen, I either double click on the animal here, or I just click on the X-ray button up here. So if I want to X-ray this animal, for example, I either double click it or I click on it once and then click on X-ray up here. There's a possible pregnancy check, though we can, by default, this is disabled. So, but sometimes people are conscious of especially valuable horses where they want to make sure that there's, yeah, they're not damaging any of the foals. Okay, so you can see here there's a horse in the middle. At the bottom, you have a few other animals. So by default, active horses, dogs, cats, and smaller animals. Some of the more exotic ones are available, but yeah, it very much depends on what kind of application you have. We can dynamically show these or hide these if they're not of interest to you. For the horses, dogs, and cats, we also have a positioning guide, which I'll show you later. For most of these, we just have some very, very basic exams, but there are more exotic ones. I think the most exotic one I've seen so far is a fish. So if you want to X-ray fish, that's certainly an option with our software as well. Okay, so if I want to actually select the part, I am in planning mode right now. That means anything I select here will get added to my future plannings. So the X-ray screen is divided into 3 fields here. You can see planning, editing, and exposure. I cannot expose anything until I've at least planned something, because the software does have to know what kind of image we're going to take. Otherwise, it cannot really do much. So if I mouse over one of these areas here, you can see what exactly it is. And if I click on one of the areas, it's going to show me additional possible projections here. So here I could plan if I want to take some back image for the horse, I can just click on this and this and this. There we go. And now I have some T-spine and L-spine images planned here. And you can already see there's some suggested values as well. If I want to take some additional images as well, maybe a hind leg for some reason, I want to edit to that, I can do that as well. And so sometimes what you want to do is take a lot of images, especially for horses. There's sometimes these pre-purchase examinations. And so what we have is also what's called a macro. So where one button, these red buttons here, contains a lot of plannings. So if I click on this one button here, it's going to add about 18 different plannings to the list. So this would be for a full pre-purchase examination for a horse. Right, if I'm happy with what I've planned, I can finally go to exposure. And so in this screen, you can see some suggested generator values in here. If you have a small animal setup, there are some generators that can also be controlled directly. So you could directly input the KVMAS here, and this would get transferred to the generator. But if you have a mobile setup, this is unlikely to be supported by the generator. So theoretically, I could input values here if I had a generator connection. Down here, and perhaps more importantly, I have the detector status. So this shows me the detector battery life, Wi-Fi status, and the actual readiness. Also says ready here. So green means it's ready for an exposure. So that means theoretically, anytime I see it's green here, I could just hit the exposure button or my foot switch and then would take an image. So right now I have the T-spine planned here. Whichever one I have selected here, whichever one is marked in blue right now, would be the one that gets assigned the image if an image comes in right now. You can also see some of the images here. Some of the projections have these small images in the front. If you click on one of these, you will get the X-ray positioning guide. So obviously, if you know what you're doing, if this is the same exam you've been doing for 10 years, then you don't need the software to tell you what to look for, what to do. But sometimes you get these more exotic projections that you don't do a whole lot, or that maybe you've heard of sometime, but you've never actually done, or maybe the last time was in medical school. And in those cases, it can help. Or if you just have if you have an employee who hasn't had that much experience with X-rays, it can sometimes help to have a positioning guide here and to know more or less what you're looking for and yeah, what you should be doing. So as I said earlier, this positioning guide is available for horses, dogs, and cats. And yeah, that's about it. So these are the most common ones, of course. Maybe we can just add a small dog planning in here just to show you what it would look like. Oh, actually, let's do that afterwards. Let's finish up our horse first. Otherwise, the sedative is going to wear off. And so if I hit the button here, I'm going to get an image. In your case, obviously, you would hit the hand switch on the generator. So yeah, I don't have a demo image for that, so that was not the best one to try. Of course not. Let's just take a horse here. So this is, well, it could pass for a right hind, why not? Right, so you can see here now I have an image. I can set left-right markers. I can also have these set automatically if need be. So if you're taking a lot of images, sometimes it can be useful to have these set automatically. But by default, you can set them very, very quickly here. I can do some zooming in and out. If you have a touch screen, you can also use that for zooming. I can turn my image the correct way. So in this case, it's already the right way around. Brighter, darker, I can make some very quick contrast adjustments with the right mouse button as well. So I can quickly make sure the image is fine and then continue on to the next one. What you might have already seen, there's also an automatic switch. So this is right now set to 15 seconds, but we can also decrease that time. So especially, as I said earlier, if you're doing something like a pre-purchase examination, you want to do this very, very quickly. So you just want to move from the right front back to a horse, left front. And so making sure that the software switches automatically to the next image, gets ready again, we can set it up in that way. So you don't need more than like 6 or 7 seconds perhaps per image, and you can just keep going. Right, so I'm not going to go through all of these now. I don't want to do a full pre-purchase examination. I saw the foot. I think the horse is healthy. Looks good to me. And if I'm unhappy with an image, I can reject it. So that's what this little trash guy here is for. If you click on this, it will reject the image and I can immediately take the same image again. So again, you're not losing a lot of time. You just hit one button and immediately can take the same image. And let's hope this time it's not moving. Well, this looks much better than before, obviously. If afterwards I decide, no, you know what, the first image was fine or even better than the one I took afterwards, I can also hit the restore button here and it's gonna restore the rejected one as well. If I want to view the image in full screen, I also have this eye symbol here. So this is where I can do measurements and such, apply filters and whatnot, but we'll take a look at this in a bit more depth in a few minutes. Right, so if I'm happy with all of the images, I can finish the study. So down here it says finish study. You can also finish images individually by hitting the green check mark here. But normally what you can just do is once you've taken all of the images, then they're all fine. You can hit finish study. And now it's going to show me a little warning because obviously I only shot 3 out of the 20 planned images. So it's going to say, okay, are you sure? That doesn't seem right, but yeah, that's right in this case. I can just hit execute and I'm done with the study. So as soon as I finish the study will get sent to a PAX if I have one connected. So if you have some kind of archive that can receive the images and you're in the right network for it, it will automatically send the images there as soon as you finish the study. And once it does that, it's going to put you back into the patient screen here. So this is back to square one, basically. Now I can take the next patient if it's on site. So I could theoretically, let's just go over one more time. Again, I double click it here or I click on the X-ray button. Then I plan whatever I want to do. Okay, so maybe in this case, Hamero is not a horse. It's maybe a cat in this one. And so we can take a look at that. It's very similar. Again, you have an overview here. If I mouse over one of these for a minute, then you're going to see what exactly the area is. And if I click on the area, it's going to give me the actual plannings here. So let's do a thorax for this cat. Again, you have this positioning guide here. So if I click on this, I'm going to see a sedated cat from the looks of it. And this just gives you some hints on how to position the animal. Right, if I want to expose, I go to exposure or I double click the planning here. And again, this gets me to the exposure screen. The detector now says ready. It's green here. That means now I can expose my image. And so this is a thorax. So in this case, I have a collimation. So what I can do is I can manually draw a black border. The software will do this automatically. So I did it manually in this case, but I can show you how it would normally happen. So I think we have a cat's skull. I think we have one that can show this off beautifully. There we go. So you can see the software automatically recognizes the borders here and automatically draws what's called a black border. So it automatically limits your field of view to this so your eyes don't get distracted by the bright white. If I finish the image, it will automatically crop it as well. So if I say, hey, finish this image, it's gonna automatically crop this and only this part here will get sent to the PACS. If I'm not happy with the cropping or anything else, I can always reopen the image as we just seen. And so maybe, you know, I really just want to see this, the head itself here. There we go. And so I finished that, and that's this. One more thing I can do here also, apart from the black border, is what's called the white point. So sometimes also referred to as a region of interest. So this function here, similar to the black border, you don't need to use it. The software does it by itself and does it well, but sometimes you might want to manually adjust it. So what I can do with this is I can set a region of interest in the software so I can increase contrast in certain areas. So here, for example, if I want more contrast in the soft tissue, I can set the region of interest here, the white point, and obviously that means I'm going to lose some contrast in the other areas. Whereas the other way around, if I want to see a bit more bones here, I can set it in there, and that's going to lose me a bit of contrast in the soft tissue. So this can be manually reset depending on what kind of tissue you want to see. And if you've done anything and you're not sure what you did, you can always reprocess the image down here with this arrow, and that just goes back to the defaults. Okay, if I'm happy with my study, I can again finish it, and yeah, I'm back to the patient screen. So this is basically how you would do it. Now the last screen we didn't look at is the lists view. So again, patient is for future patients, X-ray is for the one I'm X-raying right now, and lists, this is where I have my past patients. So by default, it's going to show me today, but I can also switch to all or a specific one. I can also search for certain patients. So I can search for a name. I can search for a kind of exam I did. So if I search for skull, for example, it's only going to show me studies where I had skull images in them. And if I want to view them in full screen, I can just double click on them. And so this is going to get me again to the full screen view here. And this is where I can do some advanced diagnostics. So as an example, I could do some measurements. Maybe let's switch the horse for a realistic one. I think it is at least. I think I've seen people measure it like this before. So you're something like this. I actually forgot. Oh, not the. Sorry, that was a little technical malfunction. My microphone just gave up the ghost. I hope you can hear me again. So let's go back to this.
Yes, I can.
Right. So what I actually want to show was the angular measurement. So something like this, I can draw two lines and then I get an angle here. I think this image is not terribly suitable for what I want to show, but that's the idea behind it. So I can do length measurements, distance measurements. I can just draw stuff if I want to just point out something specific. So I can just do, yeah, something like this. Well, for a horse, it's unrealistic. You would know where it feels pain, but sometimes you can't. You have some vet-specific annotations here. So again, these are basic annotations. There are some more advanced ones if you really want to play around with it. And there's also vet-specific annotations. So like HD measurements for hip dysplasia. TPLO and TTIA are surgery prep for dogs, if I'm not mistaken, and cats as well. So you can do this as well. And whoops, sorry, didn't mean to exit out of it. And you can do some advanced diagnostics here, such as applying filters. So I can apply a sharpness filter, for example, to get the whole image to look a bit more crisp. Obviously, that does create noise though. Or sometimes an inversion filter can help to see certain details more clearly. And I can also, as I said earlier, use window leveling, so I can manually window level with these bars here, or I can just hold the right mouse button and go left, right, up, down to optimize contrast in certain areas. Lastly, perhaps the most important thing here is you can export images. So I can get the image to other computers, for example. So I can send emails from here. I can upload images to the cloud. I can burn a patient CD, print the images on my printer, or just export them, put them on a desktop or on a thumb drive, anything like that. So anything you need to do to get the system onto a different one or hand it over to either the patient, the customer, or a different doctor perhaps for a second opinion, something like that. So all of this is down here in the management section. Right. One more thing I can do from the list view here is make subsequent adjustments. So for some reason, I don't know, I noticed, oh, you know what, this R here, that's actually not right. This was supposed to be a left. And so you can still change that. And so to do that, I just select the image here and I go back to the X-ray screen. And now I'm back in here and I can still make adjustments to that. So I can reopen the image with the little lock here, and then I can change the right to left, or I can change the white point, or I can crop the image in different ways. So I can do all of that after I reopen the study. Or of course, I can reject the image. I can add an additional image to the study if I want to. I can plan a new one in here and then take that image as well. Right, one more thing perhaps you can do here in the list view is changing patient data. So as I said earlier, in the patient view, as you saw, there's an emergency button here. So if I hit this one, I'm gonna get right to the X-ray screen. And so maybe I now want to take an image. Go, that's my image, finish study. And I notice, oh, well, yeah, this is still emergency here. So I'm not happy with that. I don't want it to say emergency here because I might need the image for later. I might want to search for it later, and I'm not going to search for emergency, obviously. So what I need to do is change the patient data here. And so here I can change everything. So I can insert the proper ID, whichever it is I'm using. Animal name. This was, yeah, I don't know. And the owner name. Go. I save that. And then here it has adjusted the settings. Okay. Yeah, I think that's about it. I hope the basic workflow is clear enough. I think it's quite straightforward. You create a patient either manually or from your network, and then you take an image, you plan an image, you expose it, and it gets finished, and you have it in the list view back here. All right, I think that's it for me.